Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, brunning, pruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire, I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Friday. We weren't with you earlier in the week, but Matt and I are with you today. And then next week we will have 3 episodes as we start diving into Dynasty rankings to make up. So some fun news to look at today. And then we will finish out our look at the class of 2023, evaluating how they sit in Dynasty after 1 year, looking at wide receivers, some of whom greatly improved their position thanks to free agency, not thanks to anything they did for themselves. But Matt, it's Friday. It's technically a holiday weekend, being as it's Easter on Sunday. But how are you feeling?
Holiday for some, not holiday for all. I did not have off today, will not have off Monday, so, but I'll be excited.
I don't think anyone takes Monday off for Easter. A lot of schools are on spring break, though. I know.
My kid's school was on spring break 2 weeks ago, maybe, and they're off Monday. They were off today. And they're also off Monday. I just, I look back now,
to just in case people are traveling.
Kind of wish I was in school nowadays with as much time as it seems as kids get off. I feel like I was off like 10 times out of the entire year when I was in school. But no, I'm good. MLB kicked off the other day, so got that going. I do love watching baseball, so I'm going to be watching they're the Guardians now. I always mess that up. The Guardians playing the Oakland A's tonight. But yeah, I'm excited.
Hope they do better than the Rockies. I saw opening day 16-1.
Oof,
I kind of felt bad because I watched like this really nice piece about the guy who got picked to be the opening day pitching starter. I didn't watch any of the game, and then I saw the score on Twitter.
Yeah, I was like, not great, Bob. But yeah, it's great. I'm looking forward to a fun-filled weekend. So,
isn't it weird that it's mostly the MLB kicking off this weekend? Because I feel like it's been over a week since wasn't the technical first game was in Japan or something
last week. Yeah, something. I don't know what happened last week. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't watch it because I was busy doing a bunch of other stuff. But I know because the baseball team that I play for, our game was canceled last Friday because it was technically opening weekend or whatever. And so there was a game on I think Thursday and Friday or something like that. And so we didn't play. And I was like, okay, cool. And then I was like, wait, but opening days next. And I was like, whatever. I'm not asking any questions. I got too much other stuff going on to worry about that right now.
Baseball wonders why people aren't able to keep track of it as well as other sports, because you literally had your opening day at 6 a.m. East Coast time.
Yeah,
in Japan.
Yeah,
10 days before everybody else. So.
You gotta grow the game in Japan, even though I think that's the second most popular place for baseball. But gotta get out there and grow the game. So.
If Roger Goodell did something like that, that would probably be the only way he'd get fired by the owners.
I still don't think he would be.
Let's dive into a little bit of news and notes. The Chiefs had previously tagged L'Jarius Sneed, which made it very fascinating that then they shipped him to the Titans for a 3rd-round pick. Yeah. I thought them tagging him was a pretty smart move. It's been a weird offseason for them. They picked up Hollywood Brown. They've let some other pieces go. At least they got the deal done with Chris Jones. But now with Sneed out of there, they pick at the bottom of the 1st round. Are you feeling maybe cornerback might be more of a need than receiver?
Yeah, I think I hate to put it this way. I feel like their defense was actually pretty good last year. We want them to go receiver because we love Patrick Mahomes. We focus on the fantasy football side of things. But let's be honest. they've been winning Super Bowls without any wide receivers, and really the only receiving threat in them having is Travis Kelce. So I don't know that they would have gone wide receiver anyways. But I don't know that forces them to go cornerback in the third round just because they move Snead on. They might do it in the first or second round. I think they'll still grab a wide receiver at some point. As much as I like Hollywood Brown, I do think he's kind of
on a 1-year deal, so even they're not.
Yeah, well, not even the 1-year deal part. I think you look at what he is like that deep threat. I mean, I know you can get him the ball in the short areas and because of his explosiveness score touchdowns, but I think he is going to be more of like that deep threat for the Kansas City offense. So I think they might still bring in a wide receiver. This is a pretty good, I think, overall wide receiver class, rookie wise. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, but I don't know if it forces them to go corner. They have a really good team as it is.
And flipping to the Titans for a minute, they've had a really good offseason free agency. Texans are looking good. Colts have been looking good. Did the Jaguars go in one offseason from being the prohibitive favorites to possibly being the worst team in the AFC South?
I mean, it's possible. I think it's all going to, I think the easy answer here is to say it's all going to come down to Trevor Lawrence. Because I think if he is able to rebound his play, even with I would say lack of moves that the Jaguars are making, they could still be a contending team in the South with Trevor Lawrence, but it's not looking pretty right now, especially with, as you just talked about how good CJ Stroud and the Texans were last year. I don't think anybody's expecting. The Colts were still a pretty good team last year. We did not get to see a lot of Anthony Richardson. There's a lot of people expecting Anthony Richardson could take that step forward with a full year playing if he stays healthy. So yeah, it's.
My only question with the Titans is, it feels like they're banking a lot on Will Levis because Mason Rudolph is a quality NFL backup, but despite what happened with the Steelers last year, that's what he is a quality NFL backup.
Personally, I think the Titans are by far the worst team in the AFC South. And I actually think the Jaguars, as much as I don't know that Trevor Lawrence is ever going to pan out.
The team that gave $50 million to Gabe Davis as their wide receiving savior is the one that's on the bottom of the heap for me.
I don't disagree with that, but I just think overall, I don't believe in Will Levis at all. Trevor Lawrence hasn't shown me much to believe in, really, if we're all being honest with ourselves, but he's better than Will Levis. So.
Knock on wood somewhere. Cordero Patterson 2-year deal with the Steelers. To me, all this does is kill my faint hopes that Calvin Austin was going to have a Cordero Patterson breakout season. Arthur Smith.
I mean, I don't even know what to think of this, to be honest with you. I mean, this has got to just screw with Najee Harris. It's got to screw with Jaylen Warren.
And they still don't have good receivers. I mean, they traded Deontay Johnson and signed Van Jefferson.
Well,
they've given no indication they want to draft a receiver.
Let's also be honest. I mean, you've watched him play for the past couple of years. They don't necessarily have the greatest quarterback passing the ball right now either in Russell Wilson. I mean, we'll see if he rebounds as a Steeler, but
I mean, Russell Wilson was actually pretty good as a passer and in fantasy last year. He was QB 14.
That's okay. Yeah, I guess that's all right. But I don't think this team.
If he had a professional coach, it would have helped.
Well, that's fair. And he does have that in Mike Tomlin. I would argue one of the best coaches in the NFL. It'll be.
They also have Justin Fields. So
Fields is going to end up being the starter for.
It's hard to tell where they're going.
I think Fields is going to end up at some point taking over for Russell Wilson, but then, Justin Fields doesn't necessarily check the ball down to the running back a ton either. So I don't know if that helps Cordero Patterson at all. I just think this is a mess of a situation, which is.
You had me at Arthur Smith.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. I love Mike Tomlin. Steelers, in my opinion, are one of the best run organizations in all the NFL. This one made no sense to me.
J.K. Dobbins cleared for football activity and then visited the Chargers, who've already signed Gus Edwards. I'm going to be honest, I don't get this at all.
If Dobbins is healthy, I get it in a way because Jim Harbaugh, from his time in college, I'm going to be honest, I don't really remember. I remember Colin Kaepernick was really good for the San Francisco 49er teams. I don't remember who their running backs were.
Frank Gore.
He leaned a lot on Frank Gore, so that's not really going to apply here. But they also had Greg Roman running the offense, which I think is honestly who deserves most of the credit for Jim Harbaugh's success in the NFL. But
and he's got him. He's got him back.
Did he bring it back?
Greg Roman's the offensive coordinator.
I didn't realize that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We talked about it because of Justin Herbert, where I think they might actually make Justin Herbert run the ball more.
Yeah, another thing they showed is Harbaugh's 49ers teams were
Yeah.
consistently 30, 31, or 32 in passing, which I still love Justin Herbert, but it kind of has to give you a little bit of pause for his dynasty value
Oh,
because
yeah, 100%. Because Harbaugh's a horrible coach, personally. So I think you have to be worried about all the Chargers. The only thing I'd be excited about is the two-headed running back field that's probably coming to Los Angeles. So,
well, and I still think they're going to end up drafting somebody in the second, third, or fourth round.
it's possible. I mean, depending on where Dobbins goes, I don't know how you can be. I love JK, and I thought he had a really good shot to be an incredibly good NFL running back, and we got to see that in spurts in between the injuries. At this point, you've got to see it to believe it with JK. Like, he's got to stay healthy. You could tell me he's going, the Chiefs have Pacheco. I was trying to think of, like, where's it? You could tell me he was going to the Dallas Cowboys right now with, like, no real running back on the roster, and I would still be hesitant to believe he can do anything because he's unfortunately just not been able to stay healthy.
Yep, we shall see. Broncos signed Josh Reynolds to a 2-year deal. This didn't do a lot for me.
No, I mean, body to come in and replace Jerry Jeudy. We've kind of hoped Josh Reynolds would be something for years. He's never really done it. I don't think he's going to.
Since the Broncos currently still seem to be on track to roll into the season with Jarrett Stidham as their one and only franchise quarterback, I'm not hopeful about a lot.
Wheels up for Reynolds.
The NFL did announce they are going to continue playing games on Christmas Day, going to play 2 on Christmas Day this year, despite it being a Wednesday.
Yeah.
To me, this feels like the NFL just basically hip checking the NBA.
Yeah, 100%. Because I believe both these teams they play on Saturday, the day before, the week before.
They're going to play whichever teams are going to end up playing Saturday the week before, and they're going to play a game on Christmas Eve. I essentially believe they're going to play Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Christmas week.
Yeah, so I mean, you're looking at whatever team, and the worst part about Wednesday, the teams who play, so they got the Saturday. So the teams that play the Tuesday, Wednesday games are screwed because you're only getting a couple days rest, and that's almost right heading into actual
Saturday to Wednesday isn't really different. I started thinking about it. They said if they play them on a Saturday, it's not that different than playing a midweek. And I'm like, what do you mean? And then I did the math because apparently math is hard. I guess Sunday to Thursday, but it just feels like they're adding more of these short week games for every team.
Well, I think the other problem with that is and you go turn right back around and have to play again on the Sunday after, because I don't think they're giving them a bye. That's too late into the season because you're talking about going right around playoff race time. So you're talking about
week 16, 17. Yeah, they never do buys.
So if you're talking about 2 games, that's 4 teams altogether having to play 3 games in like an 11-day window. That's a lot.
I feel like this is why that they're starting to add this, because the next task is going to be an 18-game season that runs over 20 weeks, where every team gets 2 buys, and then they'll be like, well, we can give you buys later in the season now.
Yeah, I get it, but I mean, you can give 1 day to another league. NBA is not ever going to come close to passing up the NFL. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, and I got it last, for 2023 when Christmas Day was a Monday. It's like, these are our normal, Sunday, Monday games. But this really does feel kind of like a slap at the NBA, which had been trying to establish Christmas Day.
Yeah.
The other piece of news, they're leaving the tush push in place, which a lot of people thought was going to get banned, but they are knocking out the hip drop tackle. How do you think this is going to affect things?
Well, I mean, hopefully it'll save some players for some specifically offensive players, for some pretty gruesome injuries that they've suffered by that. I do think, again, it's taken away a little bit something from the defense, and we didn't see it a ton. But I think, it did give the defense an advantage in a way of, like, if they didn't get a good hold on a player that's just trying to bring him down, that's what they do. They would grab him and throw all of their weight down into the ground to get the player down, because the defense is really kind of limited on where they can even hit players at this point. They can't go too high and risk getting them in the head, can't go too low. So I think it does suck for defensive players, but I get it, because if we're all being honest, yes, we're talking fantasy football, so it matters most to us, but fantasy football has also helped really drive NFL revenue and drive NFL ratings. Offense drives that as well, and so they're going to do everything they can to protect the offensive players.
Indeed. Well, that's it for news and notes. We're going to dive in. We're going to look first at receivers. We'll be going in the order that they were drafted, looking at their season. For me, if you want to keep up with, I have been updating my dynasty rankings on Campus to Canton throughout. It was almost daily there in most of the month of March after we started getting some free agency. So when I refer to landing places, I actually just pulled up my sheet to make sure that how I feel right now is what's up there. But first up on the docket for receivers, Seattle Seahawks took Jackson Smith-Njigba first round, 20th overall. We thought he was the best receiver going into the draft. He ends up being the first receiver taken. Not an ideal landing spot. With Geno Smith as his quarterback last year. He actually saw 93 targets, which was more than I had remembered, caught 63 passes, which feels like more than I remembered, but only 628 yards, only 4 touchdowns. This offseason, the good is a new offensive coordinator that, at least from the college side, which Matt will be able to speak more about, was more up-tempo passing. The bad, they brought back Noah Fant. They restructured the deal, so Tyler Lockett's still there. He still has Geno Smith and or Sam Howell, or, they're a rumored landing spot for Michael Penix. Feels like a lot of toss-ups. I have him in the wide receiver 3 category because of how deep wide receiver is, and because it just doesn't feel like he's not the best receiver on his team because DK Metcalf is there. It feels like he's sharing targets with Lockett, and our hope is that they're a higher volume passing offense, but they still have the same quarterback situation.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it from the going to the college situation, so this was, I forgot who was it, the Washington, golly, his name is Ryan Grubb.
Yeah, it was Washington's offensive coordinator.
He's been with Kalen DeBoer, who has run arguably one of the better wide open offenses in all of college football. They did a really good job when it came to those slot wide receivers. I mean, he was making names for guys that, probably shouldn't have been that good in college football. So I do think that speaks well for Jackson Smith-Njigba. But I think the difference for that is those guys that they had specifically at Fresno State were a lot more, I guess I would say, athletically gifted. Like when you think of like a Jalen Moreno-Cropper, I mean, dude, at track speed, JSN obviously doesn't have that, but he's an incredible route runner, really good hands. I think wide receiver 3 range is fair for him, though. Like, I think you could push for 2 because I would not be surprised if he ends up taking over as the wide receiver 2 in this offense. And if they do become more pass heavy, which Grubb was in college, then I think JSN could get a decent amount of volume. I mean, you just said right there he had 90 plus targets last year as the wide receiver 3 on this team. I do think once we get into the season, he can pass up Tyler Lockett. I'm with you. DK Metcalf, just based on a physical perspective, is by far the best wide receiver on that roster, and I still think he's going to get his. But I don't think that like Noah Fant's going to, be a player that really affects JSN, I guess, in the long run. It's going to come down to can Geno Smith and Sam Howell get him the ball. I think in the long run, I still really do believe in JSN's fantasy value, but I think you are looking at probably another year of him in that, like, at best, low-end wide receiver 2 range of, and when I say low-end, I mean literally like the bat, like 23, 24, and that's got to be based on some extra targets and maybe a touchdown here or there, but you're probably looking at a wide receiver 3 for one more year, and I do think he can kind of really jump forward after
that. Next up, Los Angeles Chargers, 21 overall. The very next pick took Quentin Johnson. Had a very unremarkable rookie year. Despite a lot of wide receiver injuries that gave him opportunities, he started 10 games, appeared in all 17, only saw 67 targets, only 38 receptions for 431 yards and 2 touchdowns. The good is Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are gone, so it's basically him and Josh Palmer for Justin Herbert at the moment. The bad, Greg Roman, Jim Harbaugh, probably an offensive scheme change that doesn't favor passing. And he seemed to have a -0 chemistry with Justin Herbert. Even in what feels like an improving situation, I have him in wide receiver 4.
Yeah, I mean, that seems fair. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't try and grab a wide receiver at some point in the draft as well. The wide receiver room, has like a bunch of players in it. I think you could argue lacks any real name value talent. I mean, it's really Quentin Johnson and Josh Palmer, whatever you think of those two. I mean, obviously Jalen Guyton has stepped up in moments for them as like that deep threat guy, but I don't think he's a guy you're counting on really to be one of your starting wide receivers. Greg Roman has not really had like those high-end wide receivers. I mean, you talk about all those years with Lamar there in Baltimore, and everybody would always talk about Lamar never having a wide receiver over 1,000 yards. Well, I don't think when you look at this offense, let's say even if they don't draft a wide receiver, Quentin Johnston's going to be that guy who's struggling to catch the ball last year when Justin Herbert was like practically looked like he was running it down the field and putting it in Quentin Johnston's hand, and he still dropped it. So I don't know that that's going to help him succeed anymore. And I agree. Greg Roman was great for quarterbacks like Colin Kaepernick, Lamar Jackson, and really even Andrew Luck in college. For those of you who don't know, he was the Stanford offensive coordinator with Jim Harbaugh, Andrew Luck. And I think you could say Justin Herbert is more toward Andrew Luck than he is Lamar Jackson and Colin Kaepernick. So I do expect him to run a little bit more, but I expect this to also be a very run-heavy offense, which means then you're taking some of that passing volume away. I just don't see it. I think you're feeling good about yourself if Quentin Johnson finishes as a wide receiver 4. I think he's got to show you leaps and bounds forward in preseason for you to trust starting him at any point this season.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing. Last year, you had Kellen Moore, you had Allen and Williams missing. Even Palmer missed a lot. So Quentin Johnson was the best they had, and we did not get a lot. Next up, taking number 22 overall, third receiver in a row, went to Baltimore Ravens, and that is Zay Flowers. He saw 108 targets, caught 77 for 858 yards and 5 touchdowns. Pretty nifty little season there. I feel like that's about what we can expect from him. I still have him in the wide receiver 3 range just because of how deep the position is.
Yeah, and I think that's fair too, just again, based on we were just talking about Lamar. Now, I know he passed a decent amount last year, but you're always going to have, as long as he's healthy, Mark Andrews is the one in that offense. And I don't think it's unfair to say Zay's probably the 2 now. I think he's probably past Rashad Bateman. Who else do they have on that team? Was it Nelson Aguilar?
Yeah, they had OBJ, but he's gone.
Yeah,
I don't think they've really gotten anything.
They had. I know
agency.
Tylan Wallace is still there, but he hasn't done anything. There's someone there. I don't even know his name. I think it's Dan something. I don't know what his actual last name is. So I think Zay is easily vaulted up into the wide receiver 2 territory. But again, this team is going to be built around the running attack and Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews. So I think wide receiver 3 is probably fair value for Zay Flowers.
Yeah, so right now, according to their official depth chart, you're right. Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Nelson Aguilar, Sean Ryan, and Tylan Wallace.
Okay.
Apparently, those are literally the only guys they have on the roster at receiver. But, they have Andrews, they have Isaiah Likely, they have Derrick Henry now, which kind of makes you think that they're
run heavy, yeah.
That they're going to be more of a pound on the ground. Taken 23rd overall, 4th receiver in a row last year, went to the Minnesota Vikings, Jordan Addison. 17 games for him. He saw 108 targets as well, caught 70, 911 yards, and 10 touchdowns. Had a good rookie year at times. Justin Jefferson missed a lot. No Kirk Cousins, so Justin Jefferson's back. They still have TJ Hawkinson, and right now the best quarterback on their roster is Sam Darnold. I like Jordan Addison, but it feels like Minnesota is in a weird spot, so I have him in the wide receiver 3 range as well.
That's fair. I was going to say wide receiver 4. I don't know that we'll have the efficiency passing the ball we had with Kirk. I mean, everybody loved to crap on Kirk as primetime Kirk because he never seemed to do it in those big games. But let's be honest, he was actually a very good quarterback. And I think that really helped Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. But you just mentioned having Hawkinson as well. I would not be surprised if this offense, while they do still have in head coach, he is more of a passing coach and passing offense, so they probably keep a decent passing attack. I just don't know that Jordan Addison really gets the volume for him to really be that high-end guy. So I think wide receiver 3 or 4 is fair for Addison.
Next up was Jonathan Mingo. He went second round, number 39 overall to the Panthers. Despite a dearth of weapons there, he did not have a very good season either. 85 targets, only caught 43 for 418 yards, no touchdowns. Dave Canales should boost that offense a little bit, but they went and got Deontay Johnson. Mingo, for me, is probably like an end of the roster kind of guy.
Yep, I agree. I mean, if I'm remembering correctly, they still have Adam Thielen on the roster. They still have DJ Chark.
Chark's a free agent.
Okay. So, I mean, maybe...
It's hard to imagine that they have more than one or two guys that hit as receivers.
Though. Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think this offense is going to be that good, especially with as bad as that offensive line was. Even as much as I actually liked Bryce Young over CJ Stroud last year, I don't know. So, I mean, with Chark gone... That changes my opinion maybe a little bit. Maybe Mingo can come in as like that other outside. I still think Adam Thielen's probably going to be their X. So like maybe he comes in as the other outside receiver. I think Deontay Johnson's going to be that slot wide receiver for him. I think Johnson's probably going to be the guy though. I mean, it's someone that Bryce Young will be able to check down to. I don't think he's got any fantasy value, but he could possibly be a starter next year.
Their current wide receiver room: Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo, Terrace Marshall Jr., Emir Smith-Marset, David Moore, Jalen Camp, Mike Strachan, and Cam Sims.
It's a great roster.
Deontay Johnson is good.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
They also don't really have a tight end right now. Tommy Tremble and Ian Thomas are at the top, but we'll see.
I mean, I don't think they've thrown to a tight end since Greg Olsen was there, so I don't,
Yeah, that's fair. Next up, the Packers, second round, number 50 overall, took Jayden Reed. 94 targets, caught 64, 793 yards, 8 touchdowns. Also had 11 carries for 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. I like Reed. I like Reed in this offense. He's still in the wide receiver 3 category for me because I think there's a lot of guys, but I like him and Dubs and maybe even Dontavian Wicks over Christian Watson.
Yep. Nope. I agree. I'm glad that you said wide receiver 3 because that's where I would go as well with Reed. Not only because of what he can do down the field as well as an explosive playmaker, but as you mentioned, they gave him 11 carries as well. We actually saw Jordan Love play pretty well down the stretch there at the end of the year for the Green Bay Packers. Matt LaFleur seems to be having this team moving in the right direction. I'm with you. I think Jayden Reed at some point, if he hasn't already, ends up taking over as that wide receiver 2. I know they took Christian Watson. Was it the first round?
Second
round pick. I know that they took him early and everybody was hoping he was going to do something. Just hasn't worked out. At some point, the NFL is the biggest, meritocracy, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
I think that's the correct word. Okay, I wanted to make sure. I was going to say mediocrity, and I know that's not the correct word. So I was like, no, that's not it. I do think that Jayden Reed could easily take over as the wide receiver 2 at some point over Christian Watson. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I don't think any of these Green Bay wide receivers end up as like a wide receiver 1. I think if any of them does break out, it's probably like at best low-end wide receiver 2. Wouldn't be surprised if we see 2 in the 3s because I just don't know that the offense is going to pass that much, but I do think Reed needs to be up there.
Next up, number 55 in the second round to the Kansas City Chiefs, Rashee Rice. 102 targets, caught 79 for 938 yards and 7 touchdowns. I think he's the best receiver for Kansas City. I think he's still the best receiver despite signing Marquise Brown. He is a very low-end wide receiver 2 for me. I had him on the cusp of wide receiver 2, top-end wide receiver 3.
Oh, this is hard for me. I think he's probably in the wide receiver 3 range. I think if they didn't bring in Brown, I actually wouldn't have been surprised if we see Rice maybe even jump up into like the high-end wide receiver 2s. He was pretty good for them toward the end of the season, had a couple big moments in the playoffs, like really started to stand out. Travis Kelce's coming back, so I don't think it's unfair to say we expect Kelce's probably still going to be the number 1 for that offense. Just the chemistry him and Mahomes have together. Until I think Kelce retires, he's going to be the one in that offense. And Brown just brings a part of that offense that they've never really had. Like, they tried to use MVS in that role, and granted, he did make the big catch in the Super Bowl, but outside of that, he tended to drop or misplay those, where I don't think Brown will. So I think Brown, not by volume, but by like explosive plays, could end up kind of eating somewhat into Rice's what's it called? Rice's what's the word I was just Rice's production. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word production. I think he ends up eating into Rice's production. So I wouldn't be surprised if you could get a wide receiver 2 season out of him. I think it's more likely he probably ends in like the wide receiver 3 range.
I had him right at 24, and I haven't merged in rookies yet, so could definitely drop. So I didn't have him super high. Brown doesn't do a lot for me, though. Neither does, sadly, this next guy, which was number 63 overall in the second round. Marvin Mims went to the Denver Broncos, saw only 33 targets, caught 22 for 377 and a touchdown, carried it 9 times for 30 yards. Denver's a hot mess right now. I have to be honest. I am not all in on this being the Marvin Mims breakout season. If they move Cortland Sutton, maybe I'd pull him up, but I actually have him still in the wide receiver 5 range.
No, I mean, that makes sense. I don't know how you can get excited about him. I know they were last year when they drafted him, but bringing in another wide receiver, and as you mentioned right now, I mean, they're possibly going to roll into the season with Jarrett Stidham. Like, I don't know how you can feel good about him bullying anybody.
Currently, they're not even showing him as a starter. They're showing on the Broncos depth chart Sutton, Tim Patrick, and Josh Reynolds as the starters.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, well, even that, like, let's say he was a starter. I just don't think how you could. I think you're looking at maybe one wide receiver as like a wide receiver 2. I just don't think Stidham's going to be the one to lead this offense to great things. So, yeah, I'd be hard to value him as like anything other than like a low end, like, unfortunate. I don't want to say roster clogger, because I think if things change, Mims could be interested, but he's like a low end roster guy.
I guess I can't do math. I have him at the bottom of wide receiver 4, just inside the top 50. Next up, Tank Dell. He went round 3, number 69 overall to Houston. Only got to play 11 games, 8 starts because of a broken leg, but 75 targets, 47 receptions, 709 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I like the offense. I like Tank Dell in the offense. He seemed to click really well with CJ Stroud. Yeah. I think if he comes back healthy, I have him right in the wide receiver 2 range.
Yep, I agree with that. I know everybody kind of fell in love with Nico Collins toward the end of last year, but a lot of his big production games came when Tank Dell was out. There's actually, I believe, only one game they played where Tank Dell was healthy that Nico Collins had a really good game. And you know, it was the narrative everybody talked about as well during the year. Like, CJ Stroud in the draft said he wanted the Texans to go out and get Tank Dell. Now we see why. They just had great chemistry. It worked out well for him. I hope that he does come back healthy, because I'm with you. I think if he's starting and stays healthy all season, he's going to be a stud for a very good Texans offense again next year.
Next up, third round, number 73 overall was Jalen Hyatt, who went to the New York Giants. Only 40 targets, only caught 23 passes, 373 yards, no touchdowns. Still feels like kind of a garbage offensive situation. Theoretically, they're now battling between Daniel Jones and Drew Lock. No Saquon Barkley. Jalen Hyatt is not a top 50 receiver for me.
I mean, I get not wanting to drop him because you probably drafted him early second round in your rookie drafts last year. I think he's got no value. You know, we said it last year. I know that he was productive in Tennessee's offense and he won the Biletnikoff Award, but a lot of that is just due, in my opinion, to the Josh Heupel offense and the way they moved him around. They put him in the slot a ton. I know, I don't remember the exact number, but I know for sure it was over 80% of his snaps in college came out of the slot. And at his size, and you're getting a free release out of the slot with your speed, you're not battling any kind of physical corners or safeties at all. You're just getting free run of the offense, which you can succeed at very well in college. We saw that. You don't get that in the NFL. Those corners are going to come up. They're going to check you at the line. We saw a lot of the times Hyatt was on the outside as well. I just don't know. he needs time to
because
develop.
Wan'Dale Robinson actually is a guy who looked like he took a step forward last year, and he's more likely going to be your slot guy.
Yeah.
New York has nothing but slots, but
yeah, and that's why I just don't see he's not in my opinion, a very technical route runner. I think at times you can question his hands. Like, that's why I was not in on Hyatt at all. Like, I'm not saying he can't be good when you have that kind of speed. If you start to figure it out, you can be a good player, but he needs time to develop. So, like, yeah, I would, again, I actually say he's probably right there with Marvin Mims as like low-end guys on the roster. Just you're maybe keep to see if they do something, but like I don't have any real hope for them at the moment.
Same goes for the guy that followed him in the draft from his college in Tennessee, and that's Cedric Tillman. Went third round, 74 overall. Went to the Browns, 44 targets, 21 receptions, 224 yards. But any hope that we probably had of him getting an expanded role, to me, died when they traded for and gave a massive extension to Jerry Jeudy, because with Jeudy, Elijah Moore, Amari Cooper, your favorite receiver of all time, and David Njoku on the roster, it's hard for me to imagine Tillman has much run there in Cleveland.
Yeah, I would say it's little to none. I mean, I thought he had moments at times last year, and I do think he could have taken over, especially with the fact that they had traded DPJ during the season last year. It's like, okay, maybe this gives Tillman a shot to kind of take over after a season with the Browns. But then we saw David Njoku emerge. Yeah, I mean, we saw Njoku emerge. Like, at this point, he's at best the wide receiver 4. I mean, even when he came back healthier toward the end of the year, they were still at that point playing David Bell over him. I don't know that, I don't think much of David Bell at this point either, but like, I think unfortunately, much like Jalen Hyatt, he's got to just be buried on your roster. Like, sure, if you want to hold out hope, but I don't see it.
He's actually the first guy I think we've gotten to on this list where if you were squeezed, I'd release him and not feel that bad about it, especially as you get into the point in the year where you're going to start drafting rookies.
Yeah. He for sure would be the one that I would drop, because I still think Marvin Mims and Jalen Hyatt have enough name value. You could trade for something. It would not be much, or like as a throw-in in a trade to maybe get something.
There's always a chance Denver's positioning itself to trade Courtland Sutton during the draft to move up.
I still don't know, even if they traded I'm thrilled about Mims. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I'm not big on any of those.
I love Tim Patrick, but I'd feel better about Tim Patrick if I thought I was actually going to see him play a regular season game. I feel like I've aged since the last time I saw him play. Next up, third round, number 79 overall was Josh Downs. Went to the Indianapolis Colts. Had a pretty good rookie year, 98 targets, 68 receptions, 771 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think the question for me is how high volume the passing attack is behind Michael Pittman. I prefer Downs to Alec Pierce based on what we saw, but I still have Downs probably in the wide receiver 4 category.
Yeah, I would say at best a wide receiver 3. I think they will use Pittman. They did have a player in college, Ricky Pearsall, who Anthony Richardson was really good with coming out of the slot at Florida that they really seem to connect with. Obviously, Josh Downs will be doing that in the NFL. But again, as you mentioned, how much passing volume will we get out of them? There's a lot of questions around him. I think wide receiver 4 is fair. I still like Downs, and I think, especially after the catch, and he's a very fun player to watch, and he's extremely tough as well. Went through and dealt with a lot of injuries in college and always kept playing. But I just think his upside is kind of limited in this offense. If we were talking about like him with the Kansas City Chiefs, I'd be more excited. But Indy, I just don't see Anthony Richardson passing the ball, 400 plus times next year.
Yeah, that's what, I if I was making a decision between him and Pierce right now, I feel like I'd lean toward Downs, but it all feels like a distant second to Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman back there. Next up, probably the most fascinating guy on this lower half of the draw right now, which is Michael Wilson. Went third round, 94 overall to the Cardinals. Had trouble staying on the field as a rookie. Only saw 58 targets, caught 38 for 565 yards and 3 touchdowns. What makes him interesting is, at the moment, he's at the top of Arizona's depth chart. Now, we expect they're going to take a receiver, somewhere. Probably if they don't move out of 4, they would take him right there. But Michael Wilson, you figure, is in line to get some volume, even still, I have him more in the wide receiver 5 category because I think I like Trey McBride there. And then I think they're going to get a rookie that's going to be their target hog.
So right now, I'm selling him if I can at like wide receiver 3 value because I think you can sell that, him being the number 1 on the depth chart. Because I do agree with you. I think they're probably going to take, my guess would be Malik Neighbors. I think he's the wide receiver 2 of this class. I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will be gone by that point. If they're somehow able to get Marvin Harrison at 4, you're definitely not wanting.
Well, you think Marvin Harrison's going to go in the top 3 picks?
I do actually, yeah. I think
that would mean one of that quarterback landscape gets.
Yeah, I think so. We'll see.
I hope you and I are both on this live draft coverage.
I think we will be. Let's see what's it on Thursday night. We'll be there. Yeah. I'll be there. I don't have anything on Thursday. Well, I have no, wait. Yeah, it'll be fall. I'll have no wait. That's next month. I probably won't have practice. Season will be over.
It's the end of April. It's like the 25th.
No, I'll have practice. But the draft starts so late. I'll be home. Yeah. Well, I'll be there.
It's gonna be. It's gonna. It would be so wild if. Yeah. I hope Mike is with us if the Patriots, just say YOLO and take Marvin Harrison.
Oh, Mike would do things that would get us banned on YouTube live if that happened. I
want to be a part of it though.
Oh, so do I. So we'll have to take down the channel for a little bit as we fight some lawyers. But it's a good thing we have good lawyers in Felix and Austin, so they'll get it taken care of for us. I would try and sell him, like I said, at wide receiver 3 value, though, because he is the top of that depth chart. I don't expect him to be after the draft. And then it just kind of comes down to, I don't really know what to think of Arizona right now, what the team's going to look like, what Kyler's really going to look like. So I think wide receiver 5 is fair. But like I said, if you can, there are people who are excited about him, talked about what he did toward the end of last year. I try and make that move now if you can. Like, would you trade him if you could get a 3rd-round rookie pick this year? Or is that too low?
Michael Wilson? Yeah. I'd probably try to get a 2nd-round rookie pick just because, most of us play in at least 12-man leagues. And when you start getting in, I would take a low 2nd round. But when you start getting into the 20s in your rookie picks, you're kind of just hoping you hit gold. That would still be a good step up, and if I couldn't get there, I'd probably hang on to Michael Wilson in case I'm wrong, or in case you can see more. They obviously like him a little bit. I'm still not entirely sure what we're going to see in that Arizona offense.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Next up, taking 159th overall, 5th round, Dontavian Wicks went to the Green Bay Packers, saw 58 targets, 39 receptions, 581 yards, and 4 touchdowns. He would be Exhibit A of why I'm still not sold on Michael Wilson, because taken 2 rounds in the draft later and ended up with a slightly better rookie year. He, to me, goes a little under the radar when you're talking about the Packers, and I mentioned it before. I think Reed and Dubs people are in on. I would honestly rather bank Wicks deep on my roster than pay up to get Christian Watson at this point.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I still think, because I don't know that they pass the ball a ton, and at least right now, Watson, I believe, is ahead of him on the depth chart. And we just talked about Reed earlier, who I would definitely have above Wicks as well. But I also just don't think this is going to be a very pass-heavy offense. So I think that's fair for him. He's an interesting player, but I think he's more of like a – so out of the guys that we've listed here toward the end, for me, Wicks and Downs are like those best ball guys. Like if I'm in a best ball league, I would like having them because I do think there are weeks that they could win you. Weeks because of they'll just have these explosive weeks, but overall I just don't ever trust really starting them.
Yeah, for me it would have to be too with Wicks. If you were going to feel good about starting him, it would have to be a situation like you had at the end of last season where there were enough injuries. Watson, Mr. Glass out there not available, and I think Reed missed a game, and then Wicks was the starter opposite Dubs, and you saw some production. 2 more guys at receiver before we look at a few tight ends. Another 5th round gem, taking 177 overall, Puka Nacua to the Los Angeles Rams. probably the steal of rookie drafts last year too, because I don't think I saw a single rookie draft where he went before the third round. 160 targets, 105 receptions, 1486 yards, 6 touchdowns for fifth round rookies. That would be a good career, and that was him in one season. The Rams still have a lot of pieces in place. I have him sitting as a low end wide receiver 1. I think Cooper Kupp's getting up there in age, and I think that he fits what Sean McVay wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, I know this is going to probably sound blasphemous, and I know I said this one of the last times I was on here. Like, I do think, like, Puka Nacua is a good wide receiver. Don't get me wrong. But I very much think he is a system wide receiver with what he was able to do with Sean McVay and the Rams. I don't know that he finishes as a wide receiver 1. I personally would put him in the wide receiver 2 category, but I think it's hard to, I can't like say for sure, or I can't say for a fact that like you're way too high on him, because I mean he was breaking rookie records last year. He was absolutely incredible, and I'm with you. Cooper Kupp is.
I mean, it's hard for me too.
So.
Part of me rationally wants to dox him, but it looks like the Rams actually are just running it back, and they looked pretty good. Stafford still looked pretty good. I don't know how I'd feel if Jimmy G ends up in the game, but
no, I'm with you on that part. But yeah, for me, it'd be more of a wide receiver 2. But I think you're arguing, you're splitting hairs at that point. I mean, high end wide receiver 2, low end wide receiver 1. We're probably talking a difference of 20 points maybe between 3 or 4 spots.
I currently have him sitting at 12.
Yeah.
And it's right in a range where I have like Debo, Puka, Nacua, Ayuk, Higgins, and Tank Dell.
Okay.
Yeah. Next up, the last receiver we'll look at out of this class, 6th round, 191 overall, Trey Palmer. 68 targets, 39 receptions, 385 yards, 3 touchdowns for the Buccaneers. They let go of Russell Gage. He's the wide receiver 3 there. I still have him in the wide receiver 6 tally. I think he's another guy. You mentioned a couple of those guys you'd like for best ball. Trey Palmer to me feels like best ball.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there's whenever, Mike Evans, it just doesn't seem like he's ever going to stop. I mean, I really, I feel like I've been saying for the past 3 years, this is the year, does it again last year. Chris Godwin's still good. We saw Baker revitalize his career there. So I actually think the Bucs offense is going to be good again next year. I just don't see Palmer ever really securing like a top end spot between or behind Mike Evans or Chris Godwin. I think he's always going to be behind those two, but I'm with you. There will be those games where he gets you like 2 touchdowns and like 80 yards where he ends up winning you a week if you have him. So I think, again, great best ball candidate.
All right, let's switch over and close out by looking at tight ends. First up, Dalton Kincaid went first round 25 overall to Buffalo. It seemed weird on draft night, but they found a way to maximize 91 targets, 73 receptions, 673 yards, 2 touchdowns. I think he fits what they're trying to do there. I have him in the lower half of the tight end 1 draw.
Yeah, I mean, I was wrong on Dalton Kincaid. I remember on draft night when they took him over Josh Downs, and I was sitting here saying that was the dumbest pick you could make. To him and Dawson Knox. It did. And I mean, I viewed him and Dawson Knox very similarly. We had not seen Dawson Knox do anything, but Dalton Kincaid came out and smashed. So, I mean, he definitely proved me wrong. I think that, I don't think he's up in like the top 4-ish tight ends, but like I think you could argue anywhere from 5 to 12. He's a great player. He was really good last year. And I don't really, even if he takes a small step back, he's still a tight end 1.
Next up, 2nd round, 34 overall, Sam Laporta went to the Detroit Lions. All he did was see 120 targets, catch 86 balls for 889 yards, 10 touchdowns, and finish as the tight end 1. He's a high tight end 1 for me. You could argue about him as being the tight end 1 in Dynasty. I think him, Pitts with rejuvenated life, and Trey McBride are the young guns there.
Yep. I mean, you've got to, I think, have him top 3. Sam Laporta is absolutely incredible and just continues Iowa's trend of dominating tight ends and sending him to the NFL.
2nd round, number 35 overall, went 1 pick later. Michael Mayer Liked him going into the draft. It was an interesting landing spot with the Raiders. They didn't really use him a lot. He appeared in 14 games, but only saw 40 targets, 27 receptions, 304 yards, 2 touchdowns. Do you think he gets a bigger role in year 2?
I mean, I hope so. For me, he was right up there as one of the more talented tight ends in that class last year. I mean, he wasn't up there athletically with some of those guys, but just as a pure tight end, pass catching ability, blocking, route running, everything, he was incredible. We loved him going there because of the way, we had seen who was it? Was it still McDaniels, right? Before he got fired.
McDaniels.
Like the way he used tight ends in the past, I was really excited about it. I don't know what this offense, if it's going to look the way it did toward the end of last year. I don't know that Mayer gets involved. I hope that he can be kind of like a middle, low-end tight end too. But like right now, I think he's one of the players you have to see it to believe it. I think all the talent in the world, he has all the talent in the world, but I don't know now if it's great lance. But they also brought in my boy Harrison Bryant, who,
that was an interesting.
Take anything away.
They also don't, it's Captain Jorts or Aiden O'Connell right now.
Yeah.
Devontae Adams.
I know.
Has anyone had a rougher last 2 years than Devontae Adams? Next up, Luke Musgrave, second round, 42 overall, saw 46 targets, 34 receptions, 352 yards, and a touchdown. I have him in a low-end tight end 2 range.
He's probably a tight end 3 for me. I still believe Tucker Kraft is the better tight end. I know we'll talk about here in a couple of minutes. I would put him over Musgrave in the tight end 2 category, but yeah, I mean, we'll see. I still don't think we know for sure which one of those 2 they like more. I think Tucker Kraft is the better offensive weapon personally, and Musgrave dealt with injuries again last year, which was kind of the knock against him in college as well. So it's kind of hard for me to trust in a guy who's continuing to kind of deal with injuries.
Next up, second round, 58 overall, Luke Schoonmaker. And there was a lot of excitement about that pick to Dallas because we knew with Dalton Schultz gone, somebody was going to break out. And that somebody is Jake Ferguson, who will be back. Luke Schoonmaker only saw 15 targets despite playing and appearing in all 17 games, only caught 8 passes for 65 yards, did get 2 touchdowns. But to me, I'm not even bothering rostering him right now.
Yep, right there with you. It's all about Jake Ferguson, and honestly, we don't know what the future of Dallas is right now. I know they brought back Mike McCarthy. I don't think any of us would be surprised if he's fired at the end of this season if he doesn't get it done. Dak hasn't got an extension. Like, we could be looking at a completely different Dallas Cowboys coaching staff, offense after 2024. So right now, if you're investing in anybody's Jake Ferguson, and that's it.
3 more guys to look at. Next up, Brenton Strange, also a second round tight end, 61 overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And while Evan Ingram lit it up and signed a long-term contract, Strange saw 9 targets, 5 receptions, 35 yards. Tight ends have been a big part of what Doug Peterson's doing, but I just don't feel like there's a lot of future there.
If you've got him, cut him. It's the Evan Ingram show. I mean, since he's been revitalized back with Peterson in Jacksonville, so he's looked great. I think that it's going to be him unless he gets injured. Even if he does, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not Josiah DeGuara still there and Luke Farrell. Like, I know neither one of them are quite the athletes that Strange is, but I still think it goes through them before it goes to Strange. So,
well, it's just weird. It felt like the Strange pick might have been a hedge, not knowing whether because Ingram was on that franchise tag, but then he ends up signing a long-term deal and kind of evaporates. You mentioned this guy, Tucker Kraft, went third round, 78 overall, saw 40 targets, 31 receptions, 355 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I have him kind of in the same Luke Musgrave low-end tight end too, because we don't know, but you like him better.
I do. I think Tucker Kraft just fits that offense a little bit better. I think he's a better route runner. I think he's got better hands than Luke Musgrave. So I would put him ahead just because I think he's going to end up being the better tight end. That's just a personal preference for me. They did draft Luke Musgrave ahead of him. And I know there are people who like Luke Musgrave better. He was fairly good at Oregon State. But for me, I just think Tucker Kraft is the overall better tight end.
And the last tight end we'll look at out of this class, third round, 93rd pick overall, Darnell Washington, ended up going to the Pittsburgh Steelers, appeared in all 17 games, started 7 games last year, but only saw 10 targets, did catch 7 of them for 61 yards. Pat Freiermuth is still there. New offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith. It feels like Washington was primarily taken to be a big blocker. But do you see, there were people that were decently excited he was going to make some hay for fantasy. I don't see it. Do you?
Nope. I mean, he said it in his interview. He's being brought in to be whatever the 6th or 7th offensive lineman, whatever he said in the quote. I don't remember. Like, he's a physical freak, so I get being excited about him if they actually committed to using him as a tight end. But I think there was at one point in college, they were trying to convince him to go to a tackle position. Like, he's just an incredible blocker. It gives the Pittsburgh Steelers offense just an extra advantage, especially in the running game. So I would be surprised if he brings you any kind of real fantasy value. Now, if you have points for per block, absolute stud. Going to be probably tight end 1. But if you don't,
is there a format that does blocking?
We'll find out. I don't know, actually.
I wonder if that don't they have like the all NFL fantasy now where you have to draft an actual full NFL team? There must be some kind of
was it PFF's one I know grades those guys, so he probably would grade out really well because of the blocking.
But you never know. We have seen Arthur Smith zig when most people thought he was going to zag. I mean, you have Kyle Pitts, and yet he only had eyes for Jonnu Smith. So
it's possible.
You never know. Well, that's going to do it for us today. I hope you guys have a wonderful long weekend. Since we only did 1 show this week, we're going to do 3 next week on Monday. We're going to start looking at our dynasty rankings pre-rookies to see where we're sitting with these veterans post free agency after all the moving around and value shifting. We're going to look at top 25 quarterbacks Monday and then start doing running backs on Tuesday, Friday, 50 to 26 on Tuesday, and then top 25 running backs. And I'm guessing based on this draft class, our top 25 running backs won't alter that much post draft. No. Receivers might alter. So that'll be something to look forward to. Until then, hope you guys have a great weekend as we turn into April 2. Dynasty ranks, we'll do some mock drafts, and we will talk rookies because you know what? The NFL draft is coming. And when the NFL draft does come, be sure to be keeping your eyes on the Campus to Canton feed. Matt and I and all of our colleagues and friends there will be popping up doing draft coverage. Looking forward to that a lot. Hope you will join us. It's always some good laughs. We've done it the last 2 years, 3 years. Never ceases to be entertaining, to see how the light goes out of our eyes systematically as our teams come up on the board. And, the last 2 years I've avoided it because Denver hasn't had any real draft picks. I imagine that it'll either be Mike or me that gets us kicked off of YouTube in the first round this year. So something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Till then, you guys have a happy Easter and a wonderful weekend.